Good morning, learners. Now, welcome back to the Part 2 lecture of System Analysis. So, first, let's have an overview of the lecture. Now, in this lecture, you will be able to comprehend the concept of the black box in the system approach, and further, you will understand the role of a teacher in the system approach, analyze the advantages and limitations of the system approach. So, let's move ahead. Now, this is just a quick recap of the previous lecture when I talked about the system. So, a system, it provides a framework for visualizing internal as well as the internal and external environmental factor which are involved to integrate the different elements to form an entire whole. So, system analysis is the way in which you're identifying the goal of the system and you're synthetically working towards that particular achieving that particular goal. So a system is a collection of interrelated parts that constitute a larger whole. They're linked together so that it affects the overall performance of the system. Now have a look at this diagram. So remember the common four components of the curriculum: the objectives, the materials, the method, and the evaluation, right? Now the system, it consists of four distinct elements. Now, for example, I've taken element A, B, C, and D. It could be the objectives, the content, the methods, and the evaluation. Now, how are they related and dependent on one another? Now, note that when we talk about the relationship, now this is where we're talking about this is the systemic thinking that we're talking about. So, when we're talking about relationship, when we're talking about the interdependence, interrelation, so we have to, there are different ways in which we can portray a relationship. One way is through by the diagrammatically by showing the arrow. If it's a one-way relationship, we draw like that. Two-way relationship, two-end arrow. So it's a reciprocal relationship between A and B. Or if A is only affecting B, so it would be AB. So similarly, if you look into this, so A, B, C, D is the subsystems. You have the input. Just in a little while, I'll be emphasizing what input is. So input is affecting, it's a one-way arrow. But inside the subsystems, these are the two-way arrow. That means they both are interdependent on one another, the subsystems. And then similarly, A is also, and B, C is also. It could be. Then comes the output form of the system. That means how after the input, something is happening in the between, which is known as the process, and something is coming out the process, which the output, that could be the terminal behavior. So you have an initial behavior, terminal behavior, and this is what we know as the center, that is the processes. So input, process, output model. This is another way in which you can explain this diagram. Now let's move forward. Now the process of teaching learning can be considered very complex. It's not that easy just saying that, just put all these ingredients together at one end and there will be an output, a student coming out with, a degree in his hand or a behavioral change and things like that. So the whole complexity of the system you can see in this particular diagram. Now, talking about input, like in the teaching learning process, what are the inputs? So first is the target student, or you can say the target audience. Who are the learners who are supposed to, you want to educate them, or you want to provide them the particular knowledge, their mental level, their prior knowledge, their initial behavior. You're starting with that point. And accordingly, what are the human resources? Human resources could include, of course, the teachers, the administrators, or the non-teaching staff. Then comes the technical resources. The technical resources could be the facilities that are available in the educational system, in the school systems, of course. Now, every school system does have technology driven admission process, technology driven examination, and even the teaching learning process, we are integrating technology. So the technical resources are needed. For that, of course, the technical assistant would become the human resource as well. Then everything boils down to monetary, money. So we need financial resources for the infrastructure, for the ICT, and so on, for the maintenance. Then comes the information or the content matter that is to be communicated to the target group. So you see, there are a lot of things, there are a lot of interplay of things that you can include in the input. It's like a dish that you are creating, and these are the ingredients that you have to put. Which ingredients comes first, which ingredients has to, in which quantity is supposed to, you are supposed to use it, that entirely depends on the, you can say, the judicial thinking, systemic thinking of the system designer. Now, when all of this is put together, they enter, which is what we call as the system, in which they're interplaying with another, interdependent with one another in that teaching learning process. And in the output, what do we observe? That the students whose performance we can able to evaluate their performance, we are able to observe their performance, and their terminal behavior can be recorded, it can be observed and measured, and in any specific areas as well. That is the thing. If you're not able to do this, if you're not able to do this, then no matter how much input, how much struggles, or how much efforts you're putting at this end, your output, if it is not measurable, it is not observable, it won't suffice, and it won't fulfill the entire system approach. Okay, now let's move forward. Now, black box. Now, what is this black box analogy that has been mentioned in this particular diagram? Now, the cause, you can understand black box as the cause is hidden, but the result is well known to everybody. Now, where have you heard this word black box? Black box, I think most of you must have heard the black box that is present in the aircrafts, right? And which records all the conversation and all the different noises or all the different sounds that are being made in the plane. It records that, and it is said that even after the explosion or if there is a plane crash, it is easy to retrieve the black box and to find out what could be the possible information that might have led to this kind of a disaster. So basically, black box is a metaphor that dates back to early days, you can say, of cybernetics or behaviorism, which typically it refers to a system which we can only observe the input and output. That's the key thing. We can only observe the input and output, but not the internal working. What is happening inside? It's so hard to say. It's so hard to, it's not transparent for us. It's hard to predict. It's what B.F. Skinner has conceptualized mind in general. You remember Skinner's box? There was a mouse, and there was the mouse, and in that box there was a food dispenser, there was a bulb also, there was a speaker, there was a lever and probably there was a grid also that was present. This is the rough diagram of the box. Now, how are the things placed in the box? How are they working with one another? How is the interrelationship between this? It's so hard to say. But the only thing is these were the inputs and we got the output. So the how of the system is completely transparent, but the why is potentially unfathomable. It's not easy to explain how is it happening. And this is exactly what is happening in our education system. Once the inputs are together, the whole teaching learning process becomes a black box. It's how things are interplaying with one another, and the only thing that we can perceive, which we can measure, which we can observe, is the terminal behavior or the behavioral change that is happening in the learner. So that is the black box analogy. Okay, now let's move forward. Now, a system like a teaching learning process, which is so complex And this now, even in our language, anything that is complex, we considered it as a black box. Something that if their mechanism cannot be understood, you label it as, let that be a black box. So such a system approach, it basically attempts to mold the input to a course in such a way to enable the optimum, you can say optimal assimilation of knowledge and skills. And ultimately, what are we trying to do? We are going to maximize the quality of the output. How the students whose performance or ideas can improve in a specific areas, or how the output can be optimized, the system approach makes sure that it looks into this matter. The input, the system, that is the black box, and the optimization of the quality of the output. That's our target. That's our objective that we want to reach, the goal that we want to reach. Now let's move forward. Now, the major steps in system approach in education. Now, this is basically the quick recap of my earlier lecture. Now, why am I telling you this? Because this will basically, you can say this will form the foundation of my next, you can say, subtopic, that is the role of a teacher. Once you understand the different steps that are involved in the system approach in education, then it is easy for you to comprehend why and how a teacher's role is so important at each and every stage or each and every step. So the steps of system approaches, you formulating the specific instructional objectives. You start with the terminal behavior, and of course you take into the consideration the learner's characteristics and the requirement. Then you decide upon the appropriate media to achieve the different goals. What could be the different media, the ICT facilities that can be used also. Then selecting appropriate methods for effective teaching learning to take place. What are the effective method in which the teaching learning can easily take place, the different methods a teacher can teach. Then appropriate learning experience from the set of alternative, the best alternative. First you chalk out the alternatives, then you select the best alternative. Of course, the criteria are the same: time, availability, and resource. So according to that criteria, we select the best alternative. Then after the appropriate material and tools that are required, the appropriate personal roles for teachers, for students, for supporting staff, that has to be assigned appropriately. Because in different scenario, in different teaching learning situations, sometimes the different roles are to be assigned to the students if you're using discussion method, project methods, or even to the supporting staff, different roles and responsibilities are to be given, that has to be assigned. Then you, of course, there's an implementation of the program as a tryout, then you evaluate the outcomes from the in terms of original objectives, whether they have been achieved. Because see, for any program to run, you have to understand the objectives are framed early, right? That's the first stage that comes in the pre-planning stage. And after the end, when you're evaluating and when you're getting the result through the feedback, and with the feedback, we're ensuring that all our objectives have been achieved. If not, then we revisit the objectives again and try to rectify whatever it is to be done at that particular stage. Then revising to improve the efficiency. So no system is ever perfect. There is continuous self-improvement, continuous revision. Why? Because we want to improve the efficiency of the system and ultimately improve the students' learning that through this. So these are the major steps in the system approach in education. Now let's have a look at what can a teacher do. So what is the role of a teacher? So a teacher has to act as a facilitator and a manager. So basically, she has to ensure that there is a smooth functioning of all the components in the teaching learning process. So she has to adopt different roles. She has to be a planner for a matter of discussion. She has to be a planner. Right from the starting of objectives to instructional strategies to resources and so on, she's planning and planning and planning. Then comes coordinator. She has to integrate the content, the technology, and the learning activities together, coordinate among them. And when she's also coordinating, She's also coordinating among the human personnel as well, the non-teaching staff, the students, the administrators. So she's like the center game player in this, right? Then comes evaluator. If a teacher is not able to evaluate her own students' learning, so her role, it kind of gets diluted. So how is she doing that? She has to assess the learner's outcome. She has to gather the feedback and ensure the system's effectiveness. And she makes sure that she does it through a criterion test. It could be the formative test or it could be the summative test. Then motivator, engaging learners and fostering collaboration. Every time she's, anything new she's introducing, any new best alternative she has selected, she's satisfied with them because she has selected that. But how is she supposed to motivate the students for it? How is she supposed to motivate her team members, her colleagues, the administrators? How is she able to convince them? That comes, so that's another very important role. So she has to be a motivator, she has to be an adapter. Why? Because she's modifying. Anything that is modified, that should suit the diverse learners' needs, and of course, ultimately, she's taking the feedback from there. So you see, a teacher, by having a look at these points that I have discussed, do you think a teacher can be a systemic designer or a systemist just when she's in her comfort zone? Never. She can never be like that. For her to be a systemic designer, for her, that ability to take that risk, take that first step, she has to move away from her comfort zone. And of course, and everything that she is doing is justified. It's not that randomly she's taking a risk. Everything is planned, coordinated. She's evaluating the pros and cons. She's testing it, field tryout, and then only she's implementing it. So of course, with that particular knowledge, and it requires a lot of hard work from the teacher side also. But ultimately, it pays. It pays a lot. Now let's move forward and look into the advantages of system approach. Now, what are the advantages of a system approach? Because till now, the lecture that I've given you on system approach, you must, in your mind, you must be coming up with these points that no doubt system approach is really good. I mean, there's so many advantages, there's so many benefits for it. So all those benefits and much more of them will be chalked down in this part of my discussion. So the first benefit, what is it? It is the technological advancement. Thanks to the technology, how we are integrating the machines, the media, the people to attain our defined goals. We have a defined goal, and in order to achieve that, we are using the integration of machines and media. Then system approach helps to identify the suitability of the resource material as well. Which material is suitable? So you have a right to change also. If you find a particular resource is not suitable, we can change. Again, if there is any slight change, we have to go through those steps, have a field tryout, and then revise it accordingly, and then finally, if you're satisfied with the result, then you implement it. So suitability, checking the suitability is important. Then it helps to assess the resource need, the sources and the facilities in terms of time, in terms of quantity, how many resources do we need. It keeps a tab, it keeps a check, it assesses our needs all the time, because this is highly dynamic in nature. Right now, probably you might be needing a few resources, but as the new courses are introduced, new students are coming up, now probably you need more amount of resources. You might be needing more computers, you might be needing more projectors. So that also, the quantity with time, it changes. And that is why if you see that we do chalk out our developmental plan of the different schools, we have the target that within 5 years, what are the new improvements that you need to make in the school? Because that is where we have to assess the resource need. Now, it permits an orderly introduction of the components. Everything has to be in order. Nothing can be in haphazard manner. Only when it is in order can we see the efficiency of our system approach. It avoids rigidity. It cannot tolerate rigidity at all. You cannot be strict enough to follow this particular thing, that this is the only resource that you can use, or this is the only method that you can use, or this is the only evaluation tool or technique that you can use. You cannot do that. When the students are of diverse need, how can you have this rigidity? So this in itself becomes the advantage of the system approach. Then what else? We have found that system approach also helps in the improvement in the co-curricular activities. You know how the co-curricular activities is an important part of the organization of a curriculum, and the activities that are planned which leads to the maximum development of of the personality of the learners. So of course we have seen even when we are selecting the process and the best alternative, we are looking into the co-curricular activities. Then utilization of the resources, and here of course the utilization of human and non-human material, how can they be used effectively in the school, and how we are controlling them, we are coordinating them and evaluating them at the same time, all the activities of the personnel. So we have to keep a tab, and we have to make sure that everything is in coordination with one another. Then improvement in school affair is another advantage. We have found that how the system approach, it manages and improves the whole different scenario in the schools. Basically, it's the planning procedures, how we systemically we have planned out. We have planned in terms of long-term range goals and specific short-range objectives as well. So we have long and short range objectives, the goals, and we are trying to improve our schools on the basis of these goals. Then of course there's improvement in evaluation. Like I said, there's no one way to evaluate. We have different tools and techniques of evaluation. We have formative and summative assessment that is taking place. So continuously we are bringing about an improvement in the examination. So no longer we are relying on rote memorization. We are moving from there to experiential learning, and we are improving and bringing about reformation in the evaluation system. Then improvement in guidance also. So system approach, because this also has helped in organizing and improving the guidance services in the schools, because even that too follows a systemic, because even the counselors in the schools, they are one of the human personnel that we have to work together, where they become a part of that input. And of course when they're such an important part of the input, so it definitely somewhere even in that processes they are playing a very important role, and that is affecting the terminal behavior of the learners. Then improvement in non-formal and adult education, how the system approach in education can prove an effective means for designing, controlling and improving the system of non-formal education and adult education. We have seen in that scenario, in that area also, this has really proved very beneficial. So improvement in quality of education. So you can say system approach has a full potential to control and the process, the products and evaluation by solving problems related to education. So you ultimately we find, if you just have to say in one word, what is the main advantage of system approach? So the main use or main purpose of system approach is to improve the quality of education ultimately. So wherever you're talking about quality of education, or if there is a question raised by how the quality of education is not up to the mark and things like that, so we have to revisit again and look at our systemic planning of the curriculum. Now this is the last part of the discussion of system approach when we talk about the limitations. Now you must have seen the different advantages of system approach, right? Everything has a pros and cons. So I won't say that the disadvantage, but I would say what is limiting, what is the limitation in the system approach. So the first limitation, and I think you will agree with me, is the resistance to change. That means old ways are very difficult to erase. Just now I've told you, for a teacher, she has to move away from her comfort zone. And she's not able to do that. There is a resistance in that. She's not able to adopt new methods, she's not able to adopt new technology, new technique, or new evaluation technique, or she's not able to, even when she's doing that, she's not able to convince others to do that. See, that resistance can come from anywhere. That resistance can come from students, that resistance can come from the teachers, from their team players, their colleagues. The resistance can come from the administrators also, or the resistance can come from the non-teaching personnel also. They're not ready to cooperate. They're not ready to work together. It's like the digest system I talked about, right? Every part has a role to play. And if one part is resistant, if the stomach says that I won't be able to digest food, or the mouth said that I won't chew the food properly, you can imagine what will happen to the efficiency of the whole digestive system. So similarly, if there is resistance at any level, resistance means rigidity. There is no flexibility. And flexibility is another name for system approach. For system approach, you have to be very flexible. So that becomes a limiting force. And that limiting force can be felt at any stage. And like I said, it could be from the human personnel and from the non-human personnel as well. Then it involves hard work. No doubt. It is a continuous work on the part of the school personnel. And teachers say that they're already overloaded with so much work. So is the non-teaching staff, the administrators. So you can say like both the points are kind of connected to one another, because either they can have a reason why they're resisting the change is because of the overload of the work and things like that. But nonetheless, if you try to use system approach or systemic planning, definitely things will smoothen out, it will straighten out, it will become more effective, and it will become more flexible for you to use. So first we have to taste the advantage of system approach. Once you taste it, then you cannot let go of the system approach. So it involves hard work, and especially the hard work that is paying you, or the stress that is actually paying you, that becomes a you stress for us, the happy stress. So this is where we have to convert this into a happy stress. Then comes, of course, the third, which becomes a very important limitation of system approach, and is the lack of understanding. Most of us have little knowledge or distorted knowledge. It could be the teachers, it could be the administrators. They're not familiar with the use of system approach and how can be successfully implemented. Though it is being implemented in many different fields, but we do find that in education, it still has to make a headway in education. And for that, of course, we need all of us to shed our inhibition, move away from the discomfort zone, and move away from our comfort zone and move in that new arena. I know, the uncharted territory which we have not explored yet, and let us explore it together. And hopefully, with time to come, you'll be able to embrace things as it comes. So that is all about my today's lecture on system analysis. It was a part 2. Again, I've given the list of references. You can go through it. So just to conclude, you will be so surprised to know that system thinking has been applied in various fields, right from education to defense, as well as deciding how to create a highway construction, and even for selecting a husband. This was a very nice quote given in Akhil's paper 2016. So I was sure to include it at the end of my presentation. So you see, we are using systemic thinking in our daily life. So why not in the education fields? So with this, I've come to the end, and I hope you have a very happy learning ahead. Thank you to all the learners, and have a nice day.